A week later, I walked out of the hospital. Literally. The doctor said I'd been very lucky. Because I'd been sweating, the oil didn't stick to my skin. And since oil and water don't mix, it was literally floating on top of the sweat on my legs. Even though I did receive some burns, they weren't nearly as bad as they could have been. I guess I'm just one lucky guy. Now I get to go home and barricade myself in my house, hoping that thing forgets about me, or better yet, that it had died from its burn injuries. When I got home, I walked up to the front door and saw the scratches on it. I took the steps one at a time, looking at the door frame where it had gotten stuck, trying to gouge my eyes out. I opened the door slowly, as if expecting it to be waiting behind the door to nab me and drag me off into the forest to do unspeakable things to me. I released my white knuckles from the doorknob and then quickly shut and locked the door. Splinters and sawdust covered the carpet, along with muddy, inhuman footprints. After doing a quick walkthrough of the house to make sure it wasn't there, I grabbed the vacuum and started cleaning. I had just finished when a knock at my door nearly sent me through the ceiling. Peeking out through the peephole, I saw the man who had saved me that night and opened the door. "What are you doing here?"
"I came to check on you. Mind if I come in?"
I stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. And he stepped in and scoped out the room.
"It's surprisingly clean for having a Wendigo nearly destroy it."
"I just got done vacuuming." He eyed me up and down.
"Of course you did,"
he said, flopping into a comfortable chair. "So, how goes the hunt?" I said, sitting in my usual chair. He shifted in his seat.
"It's going well."
"So you've captured it then?"
"Not exactly."
"Killed it?" He shook his head. "Then what have you done?"
"I saved your life."
"And I thank you. What have you done lately?"
"Well, that's kind of what I'm here for. How would you like to join our team?"
"Team of what?"
"Cryptid hunters."
I looked at him with sheer disbelief. "Pass."
"You haven't even heard."
"I don't want anything to do with that thing," I said, walking into the kitchen.
"But you're the only one who's ever survived an attack."
I wondered to myself if that was true, or if he was just trying to make my pride force me into a bad decision. "Pass."
"You wouldn't be going alone,"
he said, getting up and following me to the kitchen.
"There's 2 other cryptid hunters that would be along, plus me."
"Not interested."
"There's a reward for its capture. You'd get a share of it."
"No deal," I said, starting up the stairs. He seemed flustered and grasping at straws.
"You'd get to carry a big gun."
I paused halfway up the stairs. "How big of a gun?"
"Big."
I thought about it for a long moment. "All right," I said, then continued up the stairs.
"Great, then let's go."
I paused. "What do you mean, let's go? Like, right now? I just got home."
"You need to strike while the trail is fresh."
"Fresh? A week old is fresh?" He shrugged.
"The guys and your equipment are in the truck."
"Can I at least grab a shower first?" There was an odd look in his eye.
"No need. We'll be out on the trail."
He stood in silent stare down for a long moment. Then I shrugged and came back down the steps. "So, how much money will I be making?" He smiled.
"Enough."
I followed him outside, turning at the last moment to lock my front door that had seen better days and looked like a stiff breeze would blow it over. He grinned, but said nothing as we approached the truck and climbed in the back doors. The 2 men in front merely nodded when we got in. Then the driver started the truck and drove away towards the woods. I wasn't having pleasant memories flashback when we pulled into the same trailhead I had barely escaped from just over a week ago. I had to wonder if I had some head trauma they had noticed at the hospital, or if Mr. Three-Letter Government Agency had drugged me without my knowledge to get me to come back here. I was tempted to run as soon as I opened the door, but I didn't want to look like a coward in front of these guys. Even though I didn't know them from Adam, they each had a good 50 pounds of pure muscle on me. We stepped around to the back, and Mr. Three handed me a backpack that was so heavy it nearly pulled me over.
"You gonna be good with that?"
he said, noticing my struggle.
"You can take some stuff out if you want."
"Nope, I'm good," I said, hefting it onto my back and somehow managing to keep it there without my knees buckling under the weight. Next, he handed me a belt that had all kinds of stuff on it, including a big gun. It was a revolver, but the cylinder was so long I wondered if it would shoot rifle shells.
"Just remember, we're trying to capture it, not kill it."
That was never part of the deal.
"It is if you want the big payday."
I stopped in front of him. What if I want revenge? He looked me up and down, sizing me up as if seeing me for the first time.
"Then you should go home and leave the hunting to us,"
he said, then stepped around me and started down the trail. The second hunter followed him, but the third stayed behind and stared at me. "Aren't you following them?"
"I'm the rear guard. I go last. Watch everybody else's back."
"So you're waiting to see if I follow them or tuck my tail between my legs and slink home?"
"Pretty much, yeah."
I looked from the trail to the road and back again, then slumped my shoulders and started down the trail. "So, what do I call you?" I said over my shoulder to the hunter behind me. He was silent for a moment, and then softly said,
"You can call me Ray."
My mind shot back to an old comedy routine I'd seen on one of those classic TV shows. "Alright, Ray, I guess it's going to be you and me for a while because I know I won't be catching up to them with what feels like a Buick strapped to my back."
"He told you could take out whatever you felt you didn't need."
"Ever heard of this thing called pride, Ray?" He shook his head ruefully.
"Unfortunately, yes. Does that mean I can count on you to continue to make stupid decisions?"
I stopped and turned on him. "I think the answer is obvious."
"Great,"
he said, with no small amount of sarcasm. We started down the trail, and I must say, I did pretty well for around half an hour. And when I say pretty well, I mean trudging, heaving, moaning at the incredible amount of weight on my back as we slowly followed the trail through the forest. To make things worse, it started to drizzle. It didn't take too long for him to have had enough.
"Enough. Just stop right there."
I obeyed and nearly fell over backward as gravity grabbed the backpack and tried to hurl it to the ground. If it wouldn't have been for Ray catching me, I would have hit the ground hard and rolled around like a helpless turtle, unable to get up on my own. He lifted the pack off my back effortlessly and set it on the ground. He dug through it, started thrusting things toward me.
"Here,"
he said, shoving a handful of granola bars towards me.
"Put these in your pants pockets."
Next, he handed me a flashlight, some extra rounds of ammo, a water bottle, and a rain poncho. I took the poncho out of its wrapper and put it on. The first steps I took sounded like I was wearing a snowsuit, and everything he'd given me to stow in my pockets made some kind of noise. The granola bar wrappers rubbed together, the rounds of ammo clinked and clinked, and even the rain poncho made noise when I took a step. "I thought we were trying to sneak up on this thing," and I said, stopping in my tracks. "I sound like a freaking one-man band."
"Don't worry about it,"
he said, avoiding my eyes as he set the pack off to the side of the trail and stepped past me.
"I'm sure the rain will cover your sounds."
I looked up and only a few drops landed on my cheeks. The rest was just a fine mist. Narrowing my eyes, I watched as Ray walked ahead of me on the trail, and I Hadn't known him long, but it was easy to see he was hiding something. Maybe he didn't want to scare me, so I would keep on with the search. In any case, I rested my hand on the gun and its holster for comfort.
"Don't go pulling that out unless you have to,"
he said, without looking back.
"Remember, we're here to capture, not kill."
Maybe you are.
He stopped dead in his tracks and turned towards me.
"Look, I get it. You're scared. I would be too if this was the first time I was hunting something like this. But you have to do things our way so no one gets hurt. Understand?"
He hadn't said it in a threatening way, just matter of fact. But I still found myself taking a step back. What if that thing decides it wants to hurt someone? He looked me in the eyes.
"And we stop it,"
he said, and then turned and started down the trail, not even checking to see if I was following. I sighed and fell in step behind him, finding it much easier now without the heavy pack of doom weighing me down. I still rested my hand on the gun as we walked. The forest was quiet, and the animals weren't making much sound, and the wind was still. I didn't know if it was the intensifying rain or something else that seemed to spook them. "Ray," I heard someone whisper. He stopped and whipped around on me.
"What?"
he said, looking at me. I didn't say anything. His eyes were full of suspicion, but he continued along the trail. It wasn't long until we heard the sound again. "Ray." His eyes instantly shot to me, but I held up my hands in surrender and shook my head. He scanned the trees, looking for where the voice had come from when we heard it again. This time he was able to focus in on where it had come from. He started toward it without a second glance at me. "Wait a minute. Are you sure you want to follow this?"
"Of course,"
he said, but his eyes had an otherworldly quality to them, like he had been hypnotized, or somehow was under the voice's spell. He stepped forward slowly, but not carefully. It was as if he were being drawn, and started walking into the woods in front of me. He had almost disappeared when suddenly a creature appeared as huge and as real as ever. Its skin was burned all over its body, hanging loosely in some places like it was about to fall off. It was much more terrifying than the last time I'd seen it. Even the hide of the other animal that it had wore as a shawl seemed to melt to its shoulders. It slashed Ray across the throat in one lightning flash motion. All I saw was a spray of red before the creature picked Ray up and started off into the woods. Before I knew what was happening, my gun was in my hand. I was firing it over and over at the beast as it escaped with its prize. I fired the gun empty, but kept squeezing the trigger on empty cylinders. Finally, I realized I wasn't shooting anymore and emptied the shell casings out, digging in my pocket to reload and dropping bullets in my haste. Once I finally had it reloaded, I slammed the cylinder shut and looked for the creature. To my surprise, 2 trees came toward me. I aimed the shaking gun toward them when one of them said,
"Stop! Don't shoot us!"
It was so shocking to hear tree talk that I obeyed its command. They continued to advance on me when they stopped a few feet away. One of them ripped its top off, revealing a human head. It was the agent.
"Give me that gun,"
he said with an outstretched branch. "Absolutely not," I said, holding it away from him like a kid withholding a toy from a parent. "Where have you two been?" The other agent removed his treetop as well.
"We were staking out the area. You two were supposed to bring it to us so we could capture it."
"Bring it to you? How were we supposed to do that?" He stared at me for a long time, looking as though he was unsure of what to say. I finally got it. "You used me as bait. You knew once that thing got my scent it would follow me." And he shrugged.
"It was as good a plan as any."
"Except it caught on to your little plan. Now Ray is in harm's way. Could already be dead."
"What do you mean, dead?"
I described him being taken with a special emphasis on the blood spray, and he stared at me silently.
We need to regroup and think what our next tactic is.
Our next tactic is to find this thing and put as many holes in it as possible before it has Ray for an afternoon snack, I said, holding up the gun for emphasis.
I told you, we're bringing it in alive.
Even at the cost of our lives? I said, looking from one agent to the other. My point seemed to sink in, grudgingly, with both of them.
We still need to find it. After we find it, we can debate killing it or not.
Fine, this way, I said, starting in the same direction I'd seen the creature and Ray disappear.
Who died and made you boss?
He said, following as quickly as the tree outfit would let him. I turned and faced him, serious as a heart attack. Hopefully not Ray, I said, and then turned and resumed in the direction I'd seen them. I didn't turn back to see if they were following, but I could hear trees rustling behind me. I hoped that was them, or I was in trouble. As we walked, my senses were on alert, watching and listening for the creature in hopes that it wouldn't pull another sneak attack. Thinking back to the brief battle, I wondered how many of my 6 shots hit the beast, and how many might have hit Ray. I couldn't be that careless in the upcoming fight. I would have to take better aim and be patient. Not only was there Ray to think of as a potential victim, but also the 2 clowns behind me, dressed up as trees. We weren't on any trail, and that made it rough going for me. My legs were still sensitive, and I had rushed out of the house in just a pair of shorts and a Metallica t-shirt. The rain poncho I wore gave me a little warmth, but not as much as I would have liked. When we left, it was nice out, with the temperature in the mid-70s, but once the rain started, it dropped 10 degrees. That, plus the fact that we were walking through rough country, and avoiding jaggers, thorns, and all kinds of plants that seemed like they were designed just for the annoyance factor. I can't imagine how those 2 behind me were doing in those ridiculous tree outfits. I turned to check on them, but they were gone. Slowly looking around the forest, I searched for them, but they were nowhere to be found. With their outfits on, they could have been right beside me and I wouldn't know it. They also admitted to using me as bait. Maybe that's what they were doing again. I wish I would have stayed home and ordered a pizza and watched Wipeout on TV, and then fallen asleep on the couch. That would have been a good first day home from the hospital. Instead, I was freezing in the middle of the woods, all alone. Now that I looked around, I lost which direction I was going. So, now I was officially lost in the woods. Great. The rain was coming down harder now. I decided to look for some kind of shelter, regroup. I walked forward, looking not for the creature, but anything I could use to hide from the rain. A cave would be great, as long as nothing was in it. A fallen tree that I could sit under would do as well. In the end, I lucked out, and I hadn't gone far when a cave appeared up ahead. Instead of blundering inside, I circled around and watched the entrance for a while, until I was cold enough to ignore the potential danger and get out of the rain. Standing in the mouth of the cave helped a little by getting me out of the rain, but I was still freezing. I turned and looked inside. The huge maw of blackness stared back out. Even using my flashlight didn't tell me much about my impromptu rest stop. Hanging out near the entrance was not advised. I would have to find something else once the rain stopped. But as I looked up at a flash of light, followed soon by a crash of thunder that made the world shake, told me that the rain wasn't about to let up. As cold as I was, it would take a special kind of crazy to go exploring this cave that could hold any number of wild animals who had no problem eating humans. I hoped one of them wouldn't be the creature. What did the agent call it? Wendigo? Against every survival instinct, I shone my light into the cave and started walking. It was big, at least 12 feet from the ceiling, but the walls were smooth, almost like it had been dug with a machine. There weren't a lot of rocks and debris like you would envision in a cave. It seemed like someone had made this cave and concealed it as natural. But why? There was nothing out here in the middle of the woods. Even the cave itself was far off the beaten path. As I was wondering about the nature of the cave, I heard a sound behind me. Slowly I turned, hoping that the creature hadn't snuck up behind me like it did with Ray. All I saw was 2 trees, standing on either side of the cave. You've got to be kidding me. Like, no one's going to notice 2 trees suddenly growing in the middle of a cave with no sunlight? Neither tree moved, but I was sure one of them made a shushing sound. I shook my head and continued into the cave. The further I went, the more the flashlight struggled to ward off the dark. It was like the light was overwhelmed by the darkness. As big as the cave was, I came to a spot where it opened into a larger room. The ceiling was so far up, it was hard for the flashlight to reach. As I scanned around the room with the light, I settled on something over in the corner. The closer I got to it, the more I wanted to turn around and leave. I stepped up right beside it and pulled my shirt collar up over my nose to cover the stench of death and decay. It was Ray, or what was left of him, strung up on a rack. Both of his legs were gone, and the huge puddle of blood under him didn't give me hope that he had survived. I reached up and felt for a pulse anyway. My hand went right into the opening where the creature had slashed his neck, and there was no pulse. At least I didn't see any bullet holes in him. That made me feel a little better. I hung my head and turned to report to the trees following me when I saw a sight that made me question reality. The creature had returned. It was in a life and death battle with a tree. It had picked the tree up and was holding it near the top. The tree was kicking and punching the creature as though its life depended on it. The creature seemed confused at first, but once the tree had delivered a well-placed kick, the creature seemed to decide that it had had enough. It swung the tree around effortlessly like a baseball bat and smashed it into a wall. The sickening crunching sound it made on impact were a combination of wood and bone breaking. The tree instantly went limp, but the creature wanted to make sure. It threw the tree at the other wall, leaving a red splotch on impact before collapsing to the ground. The second tree hadn't moved the entire time. The creature stepped close to it, suddenly suspicious. It reached out when I made my decision to act. I pulled out the gun, aimed at the creature's head, and squeezed the trigger. I'd never fired a .44 Magnum in a cave before, and I never will again. My ears were ringing so bad I couldn't hear anything. I saw the tree holding its ears, as well as the Wendigo. Its mouth was open, and I imagined it was screaming, but I couldn't hear it. I don't know what happened, if something in me just snapped, or I realized I was about to end up like Ray. I ran up to the Wendigo while it was disoriented by the gunshot, stuck the gun under its chin near its neck, and squeezed the trigger 5 more times. The top of its head exploded with a geyser of bone and blood. It screamed so loud I even heard it through my hopefully temporary deafness. I didn't hang around to see what was going to happen. I ran towards the cave entrance, grabbing the uninjured tree and pulling him out with me. It only took a moment for the tree to get the point and run along. Once out, he guided me back to the trail and took the top of his tree disguise off to talk to me.
I told you I wanted that thing alive,
he said, looking and sounding very unhappy. Why don't you tell Ray and the other agent you just lost how that thing's life was more important than theirs? He glared at me. Don't give me that look. I just shot a Wendigo at point-blank range. You think your little glare is going to frighten me?" He continued to glare. "Okay, you have two choices here. Either drive me home or give me your keys." He finally allowed his shoulders to relax and started walking.
"I'm not giving you the keys to my car."
We walked back out in silence. Whatever his deal was with bringing the creature in alive, he was serious about it. I was just glad the whole ordeal was over. "Do you think it's dead?" He ignored me for a few minutes and finally said,
"I don't know. I've heard some amazing stories about how they recuperate."
"Wow, gee, thanks. I feel so much safer now," I said as we rounded a corner. And there, standing in the middle of the trail, was a huge bear. We both froze. What do we do?
"Shut up."
We stood as still as humanly possible, and as the bear sniffed the air, lumbered up to us. For some reason, it looked familiar. Could it possibly be the same bear that fought the Wendigo over a week ago? It had some scars and scratch marks on it that looked partially healed. It stepped up to the agent and stared at him. Perhaps it had never seen a tree partially eat a human before. That's what he looked like with the top of the outfit off. Like the tree had half digested a human the way a snake devours its prey. Then it stepped over and sniffed me. Its eyes grew wide with what I would almost call fear. But that couldn't be, right? Could it? I mean, why would a bear be afraid of me? It turned tail and ran off into the woods without looking back. What was that about?
"Do you really want to question it, or just get out of here?"
"Get out of here," I said, my feet already double timing it down the trail. We were within sight of the car before we slowed down. Both of us were breathing hard from the power walking the whole way. I was sure it couldn't have been easy for him in that tree suit.
"I think I may have figured it out,"
he said as we arrived at the car and he fished out his keys. "Do tell, O wise one."
"It smelled the Wendigo's blood on you."
"What difference does that make?"
Think about it. If you're enough of a badass to have Wendigo blood on you, the bear probably didn't want to mess with you.
I thought about it, and it made sense in a way. Just as we were about to leave, we heard an inhuman shriek off in the distance. He turned to me with a gleam in his eyes. "Oh no, you take me home right now. Then I don't care if you try to go hunt this thing down and end up getting eaten."
"Oh, all right,"
he said, pouting. We drove in silence, each of us in our own world of thoughts. Every once in a while, I couldn't help glancing in the rearview mirror, just to be sure. When we arrived at my house, I got out and turned to leave, then stopped. Why was that cave man-made?
"What makes you think it was man-made?"
he said with a nervous chuckle. The walls and ceilings were too smooth.
"They seemed rough enough to me."
"So you're not going to tell me that there was a secret military base nearby?"
"You enjoy your recuperation, sir,"
he said, handing me a business card.
"If you ever have any problems like this again, give me a call."
I dropped the card on the seat. "I think I'd be better off on my own. You don't protect your partners very well." I walked inside my house without looking back.